Welcome to the Mini Book Podcast on YouTube.
Great to be here.
We would really appreciate it if you took just a quick second to like and subscribe.
Yeah, your support really helps us keep bringing you these up-to-date book insights and discussions.
Absolutely. Okay, let's get to the Mini Book Podcast on YouTube.
Let's do it.
So here's something pretty startling to kick things off. Get this. 1 in 5 cadets who actually make it into West Point.
Which is already incredibly competitive.
Right. 1 in 5 drops out before they even graduate.
Wow, that's significant.
And what's even more surprising is where a lot of that happens during the first summer program. It's called Beast Barracks.
Beast Barracks sounds intense.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
And think about who these cadets are. Most spent like 2 years trying to get in.
Right, applications, nominations, the whole process.
Exactly. And nearly all were varsity athletes, a lot of them team captains, high achievers,
So they've already shown dedication and leadership. It's quite the contrast, isn't it?
It really is. And to give you a feel for Beast Barracks, imagine a typical day.
Okay.
Wake-up call is 5 a.m. sharp.
Oof. Early start.
Immediately followed by really intense physical training. Goes until almost 7 a.m.
And that's just the beginning of the day.
Just the warm-up, basically. The whole day is just relentless, designed to push them to their limits.
Okay, so it makes you wonder.
Exactly. What is it that predicts who actually makes it through something like that?
Not just West Point, but any really challenging experience, right?
Yeah. The lesson here seems to be that just getting over the initial hurdle, just getting in, doesn't automatically mean you have the resilience to succeed when things get really tough.
It really drills down to that core question. What makes people persevere through serious adversity?
And that question leads us straight to the work of psychologist Angela Duckworth.
Yes. Duckworth.
Her work was so significant, she actually received a MacArthur Fellowship for it, the Genius Grant.
That's major recognition. What was her big finding?
Her central idea is that passion and perseverance, when she bundles together and calls grit, might actually be more important for achieving big things than just, innate talent.
So shifting the focus a bit from just raw ability to endurance and passion, the MacArthur Award really underscores that potential shift, doesn't it?
It really does. And what adds another layer to her perspective is her own story.
Oh, how so?
Well, she mentioned she wasn't in the gifted program back in 3rd grade.
Interesting. Kind of goes against the stereotype.
Right. And she doesn't play musical instruments, another common marker people associate with, high achievers sometimes.
Okay.
Her parents were immigrants, and apparently they were just proud of her effort, not necessarily pushing for her to be some kind of prodigy.
So her own background informs her perspective.
Exactly. The lesson seems to be that exceptional achievement isn't always linked to those early signs of giftedness or like specific talents we often look for.
It suggests achievement might grow from dedication, from hard work, things that aren't always obvious right away.
So let's immerse ourselves in this concept of grit. What is it really?
Yeah, let's unpack that.
Duckworth defines it as this powerful mix. It's sustained passion for really long-term goals.
Okay, long-term.
Combined with unwavering perseverance. The ability to keep going when things get tough, when you hit roadblocks.
So it's not just intensity, it's consistency. Sticking with it over time, despite setbacks. That steady commitment.
Exactly. Now, here's where her West Point research gets really fascinating.
Okay, back to Beast Barracks.
Right. She actually measured the grit scores of the incoming cadets. Basically assessed their passion and perseverance levels.
How did she do that? Surveys?
Yeah. Questionnaires designed to gauge those qualities. Then she compared those grit scores to their whole candidate scores.
And the whole candidate score is West Point's big measure, right?
Yeah.
Talent, aptitude, everything.
Precisely. It's their comprehensive evaluation. And here's the kicker. There was no relationship between a cadet's grit score and their whole candidate score.
Really? None at all?
None. And even more telling, that whole candidate score, West Point's best measure of talent, it was useless for predicting who would actually make it through Beast Barracks.
Wow. So all that measured talent didn't predict who would stick it out that first summer?
Nope. Raw potential just didn't guarantee perseverance when the going got incredibly tough.
That really highlights it, doesn't it? Talent and grit are distinct things. One doesn't automatically mean you have the other.
Exactly right. But here's the nuance. While the whole candidate score couldn't predict completion of Beast,
Yes.
it did predict leader success, but only among those who actually finished Beast Barracks.
Okay. So for those who got through.
For those who got through, that initial talent score correlated strongly with their later academic grades, their military performance ratings, even their physical fitness scores down the line.
I see.
So the lesson is kind of twofold, isn't it? Talent might predict your ceiling if you stick around, but it doesn't predict whether you'll have the grit to stick around in the first place, especially through the initial hardships.
That initial perseverance seems to depend on something beyond just innate skill or aptitude as measured traditionally.
Right. And this whole talent versus effort debate, it's not new. It goes way back.
Oh, yeah.
Think about Francis Galton.
Yeah.
Famous scientist, statistician.
Right. Eugenics, unfortunately, but also other contributions.
Yeah. He was a massive child prodigy. Apparently could read and write fluently by age 4. Things seemed to come easily to him.
The definition of a natural talent, maybe?
Seems like it. But then contrast him with his half-cousin, Charles Darwin.
Darwin. Okay.
Darwin actually believed that intellectually people weren't all that different. He thought the real separators were things like zeal and just plain hard work.
That's a fascinating contrast within the same family, essentially. Galton, the prodigy, Darwin emphasizing effort.
And it wasn't just Darwin's opinion. Galton himself, when he studied high achievers,
Yeah.
he identified 3 key things. Ability, sure, but also remarkable zeal and a really high capacity for hard labor.
So even Galton acknowledged effort was crucial.
He did. And get this, Darwin read Galton's work and wrote to him basically saying he was surprised talent even made the list.
No way.
Yeah. Darwin doubled down, arguing that apart from, severe intellectual disabilities, the main differences between people were really just zeal and hard work. He called it the eminently important difference.
Wow. That's a strong statement from Darwin.
So the lesson here, even looking back historically, is that this idea of effort being hugely important, maybe even more than innate talent sometimes, has been around for a long time.
It's powerful to see these two influential thinkers, despite maybe different starting points, converging on how critical effort is.
It definitely sets the stage for this ongoing discussion about, what matters more, what you're born with or what you do with it.
And it hints that maybe, just maybe, we tend to focus too much on the born with it part.
Well, it seems like we might. There's some really interesting research by Chia-Young Tsei on this.
Okay, what did Say find?
She found this hidden bias. Even among experts, people who consciously say they value effort more, they tend to subconsciously favor people they perceive as naturals over strivers.
Wait, even experts who believe in hard work?
Even them. It suggests this deep-seated bias for effortless talent, even when our conscious minds tell us effort is key.
That's a really subtle but powerful finding about our subconscious preferences.
Yeah, check out this experiment she did. She had musical experts listen to identical piano performances.
Identical, okay.
Completely identical recordings.
Ah.
But she gave them different biographies for the pianists.
Ah, the manipulation.
Exactly. One was described as a natural, showed talent early, learned quickly. The other was framed as a striver, highly motivated, practiced relentlessly, overcame challenges.
Okay, natural versus striver.
And even though these experts often said things like, oh, hard work is the most important thing, they consistently rated the performance by the supposed natural as having more potential. They were even more likely to say they'd hire the natural.
Wow. Despite hearing the exact same music.
Yep. The lesson is pretty stark, isn't it? Even when we think we value effort, our gut reaction, our bias, can lean towards the allure of effortless talent.
It shows a potential disconnect between what we say we value and how we actually judge things.
And it wasn't just music. Say found this same pattern when people evaluated entrepreneurs for hiring or funding.
Really? In business, too?
Yeah. The natural entrepreneur was generally preferred. In fact, for a striver to be seen as equally appealing as a natural.
What'd it take?
The striver needed something like 4 extra years of leadership experience and significantly more startup capital.
That's a huge difference. A much higher bar for the striver.
It really is. The lesson seems to be that this societal bias towards innate talent is quite strong, and it can create real disadvantages for those perceived as having worked hard for their skills.
It really underscores how ingrained that preference might be and the hurdles it creates.
So the big takeaway here is that despite maybe intellectually understanding effort's importance, we often unconsciously give more weight to this idea of just being born gifted. And we might undervalue the sheer power of consistent, dedicated hard work.
And that bias can have real-world effects, like in hiring or just how we view success in general.
And this focus on talent, if it becomes exclusive, can actually be dangerous. Think about the whole war for talent philosophy in management.
Right, the idea that companies need to find and hoard the best people.
Exactly. Malcolm Gladwell pointed to Enron as a kind of cautionary tale of this talent mindset run amok.
Enron, yeah, definitely a cautionary tale. How does it connect to the talent focus?
Well, remember, Enron was hailed by Fortune magazine as America's most innovative company for 6 years straight.
Right, they had this image of being packed with superstars.
Total superstars, the best and the brightest. But we all know how that ended. Massive accounting fraud, bankruptcy, lives ruined.
A complete disaster.
It's a pretty stark example of what can happen when you prioritize perceived talent above everything else, especially if things like ethics, hard work on the right things get sidelined. The lesson is that focusing only on talent can blind you to other absolutely critical factors for real sustainable success.
It's a sobering reminder that just having talented people isn't enough. It might even be misleading.
Right. The point isn't that talent means nothing, obviously, but over-focusing on it distracts us from how crucial effort is.
And Duckworth argues effort plays a double role, right?
Exactly. That's a key part of her theory. Effort counts twice. First, effort is what builds your skill. It's how you get better.
Okay, build skill.
Second, effort is what makes that skill productive. It's applying the skill to actually achieve something.
Got it. So effort develops potential and drives the actual results. It's like the engine and the fuel.
That's a great way to put it. Effort is both. Sometimes, though, we see amazing performance and just assume it's pure talent. But we miss the work behind it.
Yeah, the natural myth again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sociologist Dan Chambliss studied Olympic swimmers and came up with this fantastic term, the mundanity of excellence.
The mundanity of excellence. Okay, what does that mean? Sounds almost contradictory.
It does, but it's brilliant. His point was that even these elite, world-beating swimmers, they don't get there because they were just born part fish.
Yeah, right.
Their excellence comes from the relentless, consistent, high-quality execution of countless small skills. Tiny details done perfectly over and over and over again, day after day, year after year.
So it's not magic, it's mastery of the fundamentals accumulated over time.
Precisely. It's mundane in the sense that it's built from these small everyday actions, not some singular grand gift. Even someone like Mark Spitz, who looked so effortless, that effortlessness was the product of unimaginable amounts of very deliberate, often grueling effort.
So the lesson is that greatness is often just the accumulation of superior habits and consistently doing the small things exceptionally well.
Exactly. It demystifies genius a bit, doesn't it? Shows the sheer work involved.
It really does. Makes it seem less like magic and more like construction.
Yeah. And that lines up perfectly with what the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche observed.
Nietzsche. Okay, how does he fit in?
He looked at people history calls great men or geniuses, and he argued that many of them actually weren't particularly gifted initially.
Really? Not born geniuses?
According to Nietzsche, no. He said they acquired greatness. They became geniuses through intense seriousness, like a master craftsman.
A craftsman?
Someone who first learns to build the individual parts perfectly before even attempting the whole masterpiece. He actually wrote, and this is a great quote, "Do not talk about giftedness, inborn talents. One can name great men of all kinds who were very little gifted. They acquired greatness. They all possess that seriousness of the efficient workman, which first learns to construct the parts properly before it ventures to fashion a great whole."
Wow, that's powerful. Genius as something built meticulously, not just inherent.
Exactly. The lesson reinforces this idea. Genius is often made, forged through intense dedication and practice, not simply born.
That quote really reframes it. Genius as craftsmanship. I like that.
So, if we pull all this together, Duckworth's theory of achievement becomes pretty clear.
Okay, lay it out.
Talent, she says, is basically how quickly your skills improve when you put in effort.
Right, the rate of improvement.
Achievement, though, is what happens when you take those skills you've built and actually use them. Put them into practice, produce something.
Okay, talent is speed of learning. Achievement is application.
And the critical piece is that effort contributes twice. Once to build the skill faster or slower, depending on talent. And then again, to apply that skill to make it productive, leading to actual accomplishment.
So effort is the multiplier. Talent might affect how fast you learn, but effort determines both how much skill you build and how much you achieve with it.
Exactly. Think of like a potter.
Okay.
Maybe they have some natural feel for the clay that's talent, but it's the hours and hours at the wheel, making hundreds or thousands of pots, learning from mistakes. That's the effort building the skill.
Right, lots of practice pots.
And then It's the continued effort to refine designs, experiment with glazes, and actually produce those few exceptional pieces that's effort making the skill productive, leading to achievement.
That's a great analogy. Most pots aren't masterpieces, but the effort leads to the ones that are.
Precisely. The lesson is that sustained effort is absolutely vital to turn potential, whatever its level, into real-world achievement.
That really clarifies the relationship between talent, effort, and achievement. Effort is key at both stages.
And this inner drive, this willingness to exert effort, it's not just for physical things like swimming or pottery.
No.
There's this study using a really demanding treadmill test designed to push people to their absolute physical limit.
Okay, a physical endurance test.
Right. But what predicted how long people lasted wasn't just their baseline physical fitness. A key factor was something they called stamina and strength of will.
So mental toughness played a big role, even in a physical test. Resilience.
Exactly. The ability to keep going even when every part of you is screaming to stop.
That grit factor again.
Totally. And here's the amazing part. Decades later, a psychiatrist, George Viaud, followed up with the men who took that test. They were in their 60s by then.
Decades later. Wow, what did he look at?
All sorts of life outcomes. Career success, income, relationship stability, overall psychological well-being.
The whole picture.
Yeah. And he found a strong link between how long they lasted on that treadmill test decades earlier and how well-adjusted and successful they were in their 60s.
Seriously, that perseverance on a treadmill predicted life outcomes that far down the road.
Incredible, isn't it? The lesson seems clear. The capacity for sustained effort, that willpower demonstrated early on, has really profound and long-lasting implications for your entire life. It's like a marathon, not a sprint.
That longitudinal evidence is really compelling. It makes that strength of will seem incredibly important for the long haul of life.
So we've talked a lot about the perseverance side of grit, sticking with things. But what about the other half? Passion.
Right. Grit is passion and perseverance. How does passion fit in?
Well, it's crucial to differentiate passion from, say, just intensity or infatuation.
Okay. What's the difference in this context?
Grit involves passion that is consistent over time. It's a long-term commitment to a top-level goal or direction, not just a fleeting burst of enthusiasm that fades quickly.
So it's more like enduring love than a brief crush, a deep, sustained interest.
That's a good way to put it. Think about someone like Jeffrey Gellerman.
The journalist.
Yeah, he was the East Africa bureau chief for the New York Times for about 10 years.
Wow, that's a demanding, probably dangerous beat for a long time.
Incredibly demanding. And he won a Pulitzer Prize for his work there. That kind of decade-long dedication to such challenging work, that exemplifies gritty passion.
That consistent commitment, year after year in a tough field. Yeah, I see it.
The lesson is that the passion and grit isn't just excitement. It's about sustained dedication towards an ultimate goal or area of focus.
It's that deep, abiding commitment that keeps you going, not just hopping from one interest to another.
Right. And to cultivate that kind of sustained drive, having a clear structure for your goals seems really important.
Goal structure. How so?
Pete Carroll, the football coach, talks about this. He advocates for a goal hierarchy.
Like levels of goals.
Exactly. You have your low-level goals, the daily tasks, the practice drills, the things you need to get done today.
And the nitty-gritty.
Those should serve your mid-level goals, maybe hitting certain performance benchmarks, completing a project phase.
Makes sense.
And crucially, those mid-level goals should align with and support a top-level goal. This is your ultimate concern, your life philosophy, the big picture thing you're working toward.
Your North Star, basically.
Precisely. And gritty people, they tend to have most of their goals across all levels pointing towards that same North Star. There's coherence.
So it all connects. The daily grind feels meaningful because it serves the bigger picture.
Exactly. Whereas if your goals are all over the place, not really connected, it's harder to maintain that long-term focus and drive. It can undermine grit.
So the lesson is, having a clear, consistent, and hierarchical goal structure is really key for cultivating and sustaining grit. It provides direction and purpose.
It gives that internal compass, yeah. Speaking of long-term dedication and setbacks, Bob Mankoff.
The cartoonist, former cartoon editor for The New Yorker.
That's the one. His story is amazing. He submitted cartoons to The New Yorker for years and got rejected. Thousands of times.
Thousands. Seriously. Over years.
Thousands of rejections over several years before they finally accepted one. And it was his distinctive stippling style, the dot drawings, that finally broke through.
That is incredible perseverance. Most people would have given up long before that.
Absolutely. But once he got that first one in, his success really took off. It just shows that achieving big, long-term goals, especially in creative field, often requires just unbelievable perseverance through failure.
The lesson there is pretty clear. Don't give up easily, right? Persistence in the face of rejection is often necessary.
It really hammers home that point.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to keep going.
It makes you wonder what separates those who keep going from those who don't, beyond just the goal structure.
Well, Catherine Cox did a study back in the 1920s looking at historical geniuses, 300 of them.
Okay, what did she find?
She found that just having a high IQ, high intellectual talent alone didn't really distinguish the most eminent and influential geniuses from the ones who were, let's say, less impactful.
So intelligence wasn't the sole deciding factor for historical impact.
Apparently not.
Yeah.
She looked at a whole long list of personality traits, and her findings suggested that other factors beyond just intellect were really crucial for reaching that top tier of eminence.
Things like persistence, drive.
Exactly. The lesson implied is that personality characteristics, very likely including the traits we now call grit, play a really significant role in translating potential into actual world-changing eminence.
So it's not just about being smart, it's about what you do with that intelligence driven by these other traits.
Right, which inevitably brings up the nature versus nurture question again for grit itself.
Yeah, is grit something you're born with or something you develop?
Well, like most psychological traits, research suggests it's both. There's a genetic component. Heritability studies show that genes do account for some of the differences between people in terms of grit.
Okay, so nature plays a role.
But experience and environment nurture also play a huge role. And it's important to remember what heritability means.
Right, it explains differences within a group, not the absolute level.
Exactly. Heritability tells us why people differ in grit, but it doesn't determine the average level of grit in a population. And it doesn't mean the environment can't significantly change things.
Like the Flynn effect with IQ scores rising over generations.
Perfect example. Or think about height. It's highly heritable, but average height has increased dramatically due to better nutrition. The environment matters immensely. James Flynn himself suggested things like TV and maybe even video games might have made recent generations better at complex visual processing, like how basketball skills improved dramatically once it became widely televised and played. A richer learning environment.
So the lesson is, while genes might give you a starting point or a predisposition for grit, your environment, your experiences, your opportunities for learning and growth are absolutely crucial in determining how gritty you actually become.
Couldn't have said it better. It's an interaction. So how does grit actually develop? What helps people cultivate it?
Duckworth looked at people she called mature paragons of grit, people who really exemplified it.
Okay, what did she find they had in common? She identified 4 key psychological assets that these gritty individuals seem to possess. Think of them as the pillars supporting their grit, the things that help them not quit.
4 assets. Okay, what are they?
First is interest. A deep, genuine fascination with what they do. They truly enjoy it.
Okay, interest. Makes sense. You need to like it to stick with it.
Second is practice. Not just doing it, but the deliberate effort to constantly improve. That desire to get better, whatever it takes.
Right, the commitment to mastery, practice.
Third is purpose. Connecting their work to something bigger than themselves, often the well-being of others. A sense of meaning.
Purpose. Having a why. Got it.
And fourth is hope. Not just wishful thinking, but the expectation that your own efforts can improve your future. It's about resilience, bouncing back from setbacks, believing you can overcome difficulties.
Hope, that perseverance in the face of adversity. Okay. Interest, practice, purpose, hope.
Exactly. These aren't just about willpower. They're about having these internal resources, these mindsets that fuel perseverance and passion. That's the lesson. Grit is built on these psychological foundations.
That provides a really helpful framework. It's not just one thing. It's a combination of these assets working together.
And, even small environmental shifts can influence these. Duckworth tells this little anecdote about her daughter Lucy, who was maybe 3.
Yeah.
Lucy was resisting potty training, but then she moved into the big kid classroom at preschool where none of the other kids wore diapers.
Ah, social influence.
Totally.
Yeah.
Suddenly being potty trained seemed much more interesting and purposeful. She learned really quickly after that. The new environment shifted her motivation.
That's a great little example. Shows how context can really impact those drivers, even purpose and interest, in small ways.
Right. The lesson is simply that our surroundings, the norms, the opportunities, they really can shape our motivation and help cultivate these assets.
So these four assets, interest, practice, purpose, hope, they give us a roadmap for understanding how grit develops and what keeps people going for the long haul.
I think so too. It's a much richer picture than just telling someone to try harder.
Absolutely. It's a much more holistic view.
Well, this is the end of our deep dive for today. As always, thank you so much for listening, and please do subscribe if you haven't already.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Today, we've really immersed ourselves in the core ideas from the book Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance by Angela Duckworth.
A really thought-provoking book.
Definitely. If this discussion sparked your interest, we highly encourage you to pick up a copy of the book. It goes into much more detail with lots more research and stories.
You really get the full picture from reading it.
Absolutely. You can find more information about the book and where to get it right there in the description below this video.
Check it out.
Thank you again for listening to the Mini Book Podcast.
See you next time.